I think everybody that was involved with the team looks back on it with some amazement as to how the hell did we pull that off. Suddenly it just took off. I mean, the interest was insane. That's what was, I think, one of the most impressive aspects of turning that campaign around.
Did you worry that you could deliver?
All of that effort to get back to equal terms, don't blow it now after all of that.
If you were to do it with a British outfit and it was, under your watch, what difference does that make? Ben, we know that come the end of the summer, when you're contesting that cup, should you win it, it'll be the most incredible moment for British sailing, the most incredible moment for you personally and collectively for this team. And so that will lead to it becoming talked of as a unique moment in time for you. If you look back, what is a moment in time that you would consider could rival anything like that?
Well, firstly, I've got to say we're not getting ahead of ourselves here. So it's nice to have that goal, that target, and believe you me, we're working on that, but long way to go. But yeah, looking back, something similar, certainly for me, being involved with a winning team in the America's Cup 2013 with Oracle Team USA in San Francisco, that amazing finals against Emirates Team New Zealand, being 8-1 down and coming back to win it 9-8. That was some amazing time.
Can we put that into context? Because it was the most remarkable event for all manner of reasons and lots of twists and turns along the way, lots of different storylines playing out. But how did you go into that cup competition? I mean, we'd only just started dating when you embarked on that particular adventure. And I recall it being not the happiest of times. It was a really tricky time.
I think everybody that was involved with the team looks back on it with some amazement as to how the hell did we pull that off.
Yeah.
I mean, I was only involved with the team for the final 12 months of the campaign. A lot had gone on before. For those that remember, there was a Dina gift challenge against Lingi with the trimaran and the big catamaran, and Oracle had obviously come out on top of that with a number of incredible sort of innovative approaches to that style of boat and the massive wing sail that ultimately was one of the big performance differentiators in that cup, and had come out of that and then developed the multi-hull aspect of the cup, and then eventually the foiling aspect of the cup. But that happened all quite late in the program, and in the build up to that there were a number of setbacks. The boat was written off quite famously under the Golden Gate Bridge, and pitch poled the boat, just absolutely destroyed it, got taken out to sea with the tides, strong tides you have in San Francisco Bay. The first foil that was a foiling generation to lift the boat up out of the water, I think within about 5 minutes of sailing, that snapped the vertical section off that. The horizontal section off that. And boat didn't measure properly, a whole number of massive setbacks. And that really, I think, sets the scene for the race in itself. As defender, we were obviously in the finals. Probably, there's an argument to say I think probably actually when you look at the other challengers, we would have made the final of the Challenger series, but whether or not we would have beaten the Kiwis, quite probably not, in terms of making the cup itself. So fortunate that we were in the final and had the time and the resource and the experience, the wherewithal to realize just how on the back foot we were and do something about it. And that realization of we've got to do something here, and how are we going to tackle this. That's what was, I think, one of the most impressive aspects of turning that campaign around, which was, I think most people within that team would agree. Up until then, it had been a pretty challenging campaign, a number of setbacks, and going into the competition on the back foot.
Yeah, also, you weren't supposed to be on the boat. So how did it come about that you ended up on the boat?
How did I end up on the boat? Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, the team had, as we talked about, the team had a tough run up, number of setbacks. there'd also been somewhat of a scandal with the measurement of the 45-foot class, which was a class of boat used for some of the World Series events in the build-up to the Cup. That meant that a couple of the key sailors effectively couldn't race in that Cup. So the sailing crew was somewhat fragmented, and then the performance of the boat wasn't really matching the Kiwis. So really on the back foot. And I think from a management perspective, just looking to make some changes somehow to bring some positivity to the thing, as well as, of course, and much more importantly, the focus on the technical side of the campaign, what modifications to the boat, what changes in setup to the boat, and then as sailors, what to work on technique-wise to really, get optimum performance from the boat. So, yeah, that's ultimately how I ended up getting on board the boat. It was just trying to, I think, bring some positivity.
When did that call come? When did that call come from the powers that be that said, we're going to switch things up, we're going to sub you in for this guy, and this is how we want to do it moving forward? I mean, I recall it was something, it must have been like at 6-1 down or something. It was something around that number that call came in.
I think from memory, the Kiwis were on 4 wins and we were on -1 win. We'd started on -2 wins because of this measurement issue with the 45-footers. And I remember being on the primary chase boat with Russell, Grant Simmer, a few others, and Russell's phone going. And
this is Russell Coates.
Russell Coates, and yeah, it's pretty clear he's talking to Larry, and they were Larry Ellison.
Yeah, okay.
And they were having I'm not sure what Larry's tone was like, but certainly it was a serious conversation. And I remember Russell put the phone down and he looked at me and he just sort of he has this sort of look that he can sometimes make, and he just shook his head, and I could tell then that something was going on. But he had to obviously make some pretty tough decisions. And when it came to the sailing team, he also needed to speak to Jimmy Spithill, who was the skipper and leader of the sailing team, to get his buy-in and make that decision together. And then ultimately John Kostecki, who was the tactician, super hugely experienced, multiple Olympics, America's Cup successes, was that was the switch that was made. And I'll never forget John's response to it. Was one of the most impressive things I think I've seen in my career, in my sporting career. Just must have been a really tough moment for him, but the way he responded, and we chatted, and it was all about what he could do to help me get up to speed for the next day, which was again super impressive.
Yeah, so just to put that in context as well, because you weren't the tactician, that wasn't your role on the B boat either. So you suddenly had to step into the shoes of being a tactician, and you had to learn how to make the equipment work that would guide you and make the key decisions along the race course, right? In about 16 hours.
Probably tells you just how desperate the situation was, given that I'd never been a tactician on any boat, let alone an America's Cup foiling 75-foot multi-hull.
So Ben and I have made a sleep supplement, and it's called Night Powder. It comes like this in a pouch with a scoop, or like that in a sachet box, and always with a shaker cup, and also with some free travel sachets as well. 7 of those are included. If you're struggling with your sleep, or you really just don't want the groggy mornings from a sleep supplement, then come and find us at ainslie.com. Just put in introductory 20 at checkout and get 20% off your first order.
Hello performance people, listeners, my name is Freddie Carr and I host a podcast called the Inside Tack, which is a podcast that follows the British America's Cup team, INEOS Britannia, as we get ready for the 37th America's Cup down here in Barcelona. We also follow the youth and the first ever Women's America's Cup. We would love you to like and subscribe to our podcast. Follow us on all your social media channels as we get ready for our sporting challenge of a lifetime.
yeah, it was quite some step up.
Well, what was that feeling like? You must have been a sort of really complex feeling of exhilarated to get the opportunity to try and make some change. But at the same time, did you worry that you could deliver?
Yeah, for sure. I had some doubts. I hadn't seen the tactical software that John had been using. He had this iPad effectively in his life jacket that had all of the ley lines and the different time to kill for the start line, the different options that you could take around the course. So I had, some inkling of how it had developed, but I certainly hadn't used it in anger. And mixture of emotions, really, because anyone involved with a team, of course, you want to just help and do what you can to help, particularly if the chips are down and the team's on the back foot. You want to try and contribute, but at the same time, don't want to go in there and make a mess of it and make things worse. And yeah, there was definitely a chance of that. But it was it was a no-brainer for me. It was, well, get in there and like I said, as much as trying to do a good job with the tactical calls and working with Jimmy and Tom Slingsby in particular at the back end of the boat, was also really, in terms of the team psychology, was just about trying to bring some energy and positivity to the thing, because understandably, people's heads were dropping because the performance wasn't there.
Yeah, and how big a factor is that in Cup World, especially when you are in a catastrophic position of 8-1 down? You think about those characters. I mean, Tom Slingsby's now going to be helming the American boat. You've got Jimmy Spithill, who's also on the Prada boat. Two fierce rivals of yours in Sail GP as well. But in that moment, you had to galvanize. How did you gel those personalities? How did they? Because you've all got quite strong ideas about how you want to do things.
It was interesting. It was just total luck, to be honest, that it worked. We're all fiercely competitive, but all in subtle ways quite different personalities. And Jimmy, for all his bravado and he's absolutely amazing at it. The chat in the press conferences and the like, and in front of the camera, he's brilliant. But actually, you get him on a boat or in a smaller group, and he's not the guy that has to have the say all the time. It has to be dominating the conversation, and certainly in a helming role, very, very good at working with a tactician and listening to that and giving the other people on the boat the chance to make decisions and have the conversation. And Tom, again, a lot of mutual respect coming from an Olympic background, and we just sort of naturally seemed to gel in terms of figuring out who was going to look at what factors on the course, the wind, the performance of the boat, the opposition, and then making some of those decisions really collectively. And so, yeah, it was astonishing that it worked. I mean, really, when you look at it on paper, it shouldn't have worked. And that's one of the amazing things about that whole Cup cycle.
And one of the amazing things about sport, because it is that unpredictable nature of it. A couple of key things that I remember got said over the airwaves during that time, which were just great moments. One of which was you saying to Jimmy, "Just sail the boat," because there was obviously a little moment there. And then the other one was when Jimmy stood up in that press conference, and I think it was Dean Barker, who was his the opposite number at that time, and said to the journalist, "Can you just imagine what happens from here if they lose?" Talking about pressure. What about the psychology of that? The psychology of turning from the jaws of defeat a thing into victory, and how you play on the minds of the opposition in that way as you get closer and closer to your end goal.
Well, it was a great example of sports psychology, wasn't it? Really, I mean, we talked about the afterguard on Oracle, how that shouldn't have really worked, and yeah, maybe that was an example of an area where probably in hindsight, I could have been slightly easier on Jimmy, because ultimately he and Tom were just talking about some of the maneuvers they were pulling off and the choreography of that, which was actually a great thing to do in terms of the performance of the boat. And I was a bit more head into, well, let's just focus on getting around the course and trying to win this race. So, but those are the nuances of competition. But yeah, all things said, it was incredible that we were able to pull it together. And the psychology of, you know, what's said and people's emotions and how they hold themselves in press conferences. I mean, that was one of the most impressive things from Jimmy, really. That whole cycle was back, as much as the team was on the back foot, he kept turning up day after day, keeping positive, you know, batting off the inevitable really tough questions about the poor performance of the team. And then that was just what a cracking line, you know, imagine if they lost from here. And you could just see Dean Barker on the other side, just, you know, to be fair, he did a pretty good job of holding himself as well, but, you know, he definitely squirmed at that one. And it was incredibly tough for the Kiwis as they lost race after race after race. And it just, you know, the tide was turning, and you could see that.
Can you see that as a competitor? Can you see it in your opposition when you realise that you know it is shifting? That you can you sense it? I mean, you talk of a story where they're waiting on the end of the dock and they drop one by one as the days go on. Yeah,
they used to wait for us on the dock.
The Kiwi team.
And the Kiwi team used to wait for us on the dock as it's for some reason the timing always just seemed to work like that, towing out to this sort of holding pen where we go and then we do the pre-race press conference and media dock out show. And they were sort of always there. And I said to Jimmy, oh, let's just go a bit closer, you know, one day and give them a wave. And we sort of went and gave them a wave, and they gave us 2 fingers back, which was probably fair enough. But yeah, that group got smaller and smaller until we got to the final winner takes all race, and there was no one there. And so those little things do make a difference. And, you know, it gets talked about a lot, that momentum certainly in sport, but really in any walk of life, is huge, isn't it? If you get things going, you get a bit more confidence, you know, get more speed out of the boat, you're more confident in the decision making, and the whole thing just snowballs.
And then what to that last race? So it was 8-8, winner takes all, you know, weeks of racing and delayed racing as well. It just seemed to take forever to get to the final day, which weirdly, coincidentally, was my birthday, and I'd flown mum and dad over as well with myself to watch you in it. And so on that day, September the 25th, what did that feel like to actually finally come good?
Well, I think most people, when they look back at these moments, you sort of, you know, it was a while ago now, but it was still another race. And I think that, again, talking about the momentum and that siege mentality, the team had ultimately got itself into a bit of siege mentality, because it was, you've got to win another 8 races, and no one really believed that we could do it. And I think if people were being honest, a lot of people within our team didn't believe we could do it. And I have to say, I certainly had my doubts. I mean, you never give up, but you think, this is going to be tough. So you're still in that siege mentality, really, that all of that effort to get back to equal terms, don't blow it now after all of that. And even with that race, we had our issues. You know, in the warm up before the start, we bust one of the control arms in the wing sail, which we couldn't race like that. So we had Jeff Causey, who's actually here with us now with INEOS Britannia. He was up, winched up the mast, and effectively super glued this control arm back together. And we just prayed that the glue would go off and it would hold in time. And he literally stepped off the boat about 1 minute 30, 2 minutes before the start of the race. So we had no warm up. We kind of duffed the start as a result. So we were behind the Kiwis. We then stuffed the boat, we fell off the foil, stuffed it down the mine pretty hard, doing about, 40, 42 knots. And at that moment, every single person on the boat was just waiting for the bang. And somehow it held together. And we got after the Kiwis, got around the course, and by that stage we had particularly on the upwind legs, we had quite a big speed advantage. So it was really just about keeping on the Kiwis' hammer, and we had a reasonable amount of confidence that we could outpace them up the upwind work, and that was how it played out. And then it was about just delivering the boat to the finish line. It was. Yeah, and it was one of those moments you'll never forget, because people talk about the sailing side of it, but it was more about actually the designers and the technicians and the engineers and the boat builders working 24-hour shifts to make the modifications to the boat that really allowed us to get that extra performance that made a difference.
And then, of course, you lifted the trophy, which was magic. Somehow my dad found his way onto the stage, which was slightly embarrassing.
Captain Clive.
It's just
What's
what it was.
Captain Clive doing here?
God knows what will happen this time if you actually managed to win this thing. But when, after that moment happened, you took the boat back with Larry Ellison and Russell Coots to its home, wherever that may have
Pier
been,
80.
somewhere
Pier 80,
off.
which was
Pier
the
80.
base. Yep.
So that was the base. You were on that boat for a while, chatting. What did you talk about? What did everyone say in those moments? I mean, there probably aren't many words, but what were people saying?
It's mostly, I think, those moments. It's relief, isn't it? Really, I think for us it was massive relief. I talked about that siege mentality. We were a pretty multinational team. We were racing for each other and also for pride. I think at that point it was so bad, and so huge amount of relief. It's one of the most rewarding moments I've experienced in sport because of just where we were as a team, and talked about how much not just the sailing team, the whole team really came together. That was so impressive. And so felt a lot of pride in that. I think we all did. It was great to have Larry there. I think he was just as amazed as the rest of us were. Managed to turn things around. But I'm sure in his life, in his business career, he's seen just about everything. And even he would have been pretty amazed by it. I know he was. And delighted for the team and delighted for the America's Cup, that it had gone from actually being a pretty boring contest up until that final. Suddenly it just took off. I mean, the interest was insane around the world.
I guess it's the reason why we're here. I mean, is it the defining moment that sort of has paved the way for INEOS Britannia to be here, the relationships that have been established, the team we have here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started off ending up working with Oracle because I went to Russell asking, I'd like to set up a British team, get involved with this World Series, and with an idea to getting involved with the America's Cup in the future. And he said, well, yeah, we actually wanted to talk to you about joining our team for the Cup. And so we figured out this neat solution whereby I entered a team into the World Series and agreed to join up with the Oracle team for the Cup, then final 12 months running. And yeah, on the back of that success in San Francisco, I'd been struggling, frankly, to find people who were interested in coming on board, be that privately or commercially. And all of a sudden the phone was off the hook in terms of people that saw that and thought, wow, these boats are amazing. That sporting story is something else. And Britain should be involved with the America's Cup. And that really triggered things off for us.
Now, I know you don't want to predict the future. I know you don't want to talk about what if.
Can't do that.
But where would it rank? I mean, it's hard to eclipse 2013, but if you were to do it with a British outfit and it was, under your watch, what difference does that make?
Well, it doesn't really matter if it's under my watch, but Britain winning the America's Cup would be one of the defining moments in the Cup's history, because of course it started around, as we all know, famously around the Isle of Wight in 1851, 173 years ago. Never been its oldest international sporting trophy. It's the only thing Britain has never won, and we're obviously a hugely proud maritime nation, and so it would be huge for the history of the Cup, and I think for the event in general. Of course, I'm saying that because I'm biased and I desperately want to win it for Britain.
And finally, what's your message to the team? Because this will go out on the eve of the preliminary regatta. So what would your message be to that group of people in that building? My message to the team is never, ever give up. We've seen the history of the Cup. So much can change even in the final weeks, days of the competition, and it's the team that, of course, they've got to have the package in the first place, but it's the team that develops that the best and really steps up when it counts that will end up winning this, and there's a long, long way to go. Brilliant. Thanks, darling. Join us for the Performance People podcast every week for the highs, lows, lessons and stories from people like this lot. Michael Johnson.
Some days what I would see is a person who is a shell of what I used to be.
Eddie Hearn. We don't operate in a business that's dangerous, but we just operate in one where you've got to sleep with one eye open. Mo Farah. It couldn't get any harder than what I've gone through, and at that point I just went for it. Paula Radcliffe. You can only control yourself. Susie Wolf. And Toto did once liken me to a donkey. Every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts.